Look at, I don't think I should be able to flex the steel with my fingernail.
In case you guys aren't up to speed with why Fred's doing what he's doing to the bed of the Ranger, as you can see, the frame behind me is completely rotted out. Now, luckily, the green bits of the truck, everything that was painted was mostly rust-free. The only area that had any rust on it was at the back of the bed corner by the back bumper. That's super hard to point to. My brain isn't wired correctly. Back there, that had some rust on it, as well as the radiator core support. So those are the only parts that are gonna have to get body worked and repainted. Everything else luckily can stay the factory paint. The frame, however, is completely corroded and rotted out, along with all the accoutrements that are attached to it. And that's why I got a donor truck, which was the exact same Calypso green metallic color, and sandblasted. It's been POR 15, and then all the suspension components have been powder coated, and all the hardware is re-zinc coated. So as soon as Fred finishes his magic with the bed, it can go down onto its new frame. Now the cab doesn't need to have any work done on it. You can see the cab, it's pretty rust-free underneath here. So it doesn't need any body work on anything that is painted green on the cab, with the exception of the radiator core support, which I'm going to cut out from the donor truck since it's the same color. The core support on this one is pretty rusty down here where it bolts to the frame at the front. It's like nuggets and chippy nuggets.
Yeah.
Chippy
So essentially,
nuggets.
this was kind of like a little bit of like exploration, right? To see kind of how high up the rust went back here. And everywhere there was a rust bubble on the surface, I found out that there was actually a little bit of like a hole back behind each spot. And I think this was actually the highest up hole
That's weight
that I
reduction.
found. So I
Supposed
looked
to be
back
there.
behind here, and you can see there's some rust that's up past that hole a little bit. So I marked it on the front. So the top of the rust is about there on the back side of the panel. So I'm gonna have to section along that line all the way across, and the rot kind of, it follows like a weird pattern or whatever back here, but it more or less kind of does one of these numbers. And then in the center, it makes like a V shape, right? So in the center, it's actually pretty clean. So I figured that we could probably just section it here and just keep this original. And we'll just do some port 15 and stuff back behind there.
Yeah.
And that way I can keep the bodywork just kind of a little bit further back over here. Gives me more room to kind of blend the color out this direction. So that I'm not like literally sectioning the whole bottom and then having to work up and then blend all the way up and across. And then I have to take the color out even further back that way. So we're gonna try to keep the repairs as small as possible, but unfortunately, because of how high up the rust went, there's only so much that I can really do, you know?
Yeah.
But, and then we'll have to figure out what you want to do with the pinstripe. And
Order them
that's
from Ford somehow.
yet to be determined, or get them from Ford.
There's got to be a dealership somewhere in the United States somewhere that has a box of those NOS factory decals for an extent or for a single cap long bed. That's the hard part, is because it's a 7-foot bed. Because I found them for an extended cab 6-foot bed in the same grape blue and silver, but
You just gotta find some crotchety old man who's had like a Ford dealership since like 1963.
well, the problem is I found the part number for the extended cab trucks, and then I found the part number for the single cab long beds, but not in that color. So this is like, I can't find this color in single cab long bed part number, but I found this color in extended cab short bed. I Googled a lot last night, a lot.
All right, so the first thing I want to do is get these patch panels removed off the old substructure. So I got to go along and remove all the spot welds on this back seam here. And then there's a few on the bottom. A little hard to see where it's at, but along this guy here. So I got it clamped in the vise just to hold on to it for now. I'm gonna drill these ones out and then I'll flip it and I'll drill the ones out on the bottom, and then I'll start getting this thing all cleaned and prepped up, and then we'll overlay it on this and start measuring and figuring out where we got to do the cut. Fun. So I'm gonna try to preserve some of this little substructure stuff in here, just in case I need it. I'm assuming since her cab corner, bed corner, whatever, is so rotted out back here, that this is probably rotted out under there as well. So there's a good chance I'll have to splice this little chunk in. Looks like it's just a little like L shape right here. Hopefully it's not all the way through to this, because if I have to replace this, oh man, it won't be fun. So I don't want to do this part, so I'm gonna make Reed do it
every time.
So we're gonna use this 3M bristle pad disc. I think that's an 80 grit one, and it's really good at removing material without damaging any of the sheet metal or anything underneath it. So we're gonna use that to just strip off all the paint and coatings and everything. There's like that rubberized undercoat and stuff on the bottom section. So we got to get all this stripped down to bare metal up to this tape line, and then I'm going to give it a quick slice, and then this patch panel should be more or less ready for us to overlay it and figure out, you know, where the cuts are going to go and stuff. So hop to it, Reed.
Oh god.
I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut out some of this, but I'm gonna leave it really long. That way, because if I overlap the patch panel over top of all of this, there's a chance that it's pulling pressure on the panel, it's actually pulling it down. So when I do the cut, if I do the cut and I just leave the panel kind of clamped over it the way it sits, it could spring back down a little bit, and it could actually mess up where this, that's supposed to meet up. So I think what I'm gonna do, I'll just trim it about yay, real short, so that all this is out of the way. And we do need to see what's going on with the substructure under there too. I wouldn't normally be this like aggressive with it, but this is all like obviously rotted and as well. So I'm probably gonna have to do that piece as well. So I'm really not that concerned with it. I'm just kind of manhandling it out. This little like L-shaped structure that goes around the side here. Here's the new one for reference. You can see it actually has just a little lap right there where I can just drill these out and replace it in there, as long as it's not too rotted on the back, which is it? I can't. It might be savable. Wire wheel it a little bit and see. And then hopefully once I do the cut up here, I can access all the spot welds on this plate. That way we can do that with this little piece here and then put the patch panel in. now that we got the basic shape of this cut out, I'm gonna do the substructure. And what's really cool is I actually have perfect access to all the spot welds I need to get to by just doing that cut first, just like how we planned. So I'm gonna get these ones off, these ones, and then there's a couple left on this guy. And then I'll do the same thing on that piece. I'll get the spot welds leveled out on the remaining pieces in there, and then I'll go ahead and plug weld this piece and this piece on, and then we'll do the final adjustments on this and get it all trued up with the body and everything so that we got a nice even seam. And I'll buzz this edge down to bare metal, and we'll just slowly tack, blow it off with compressed air, keep it really cool. That way I keep the warping to a minimum. That's how I normally do it, and it works pretty well. So I already fit it, and then remove the panel, and then fit it, and then remove the panel and adjust it, and then fit it, and then adjust it, and then remove the panel, and then adjust it and fit it and remove the panel. And I think it's in the perfect spot now. So we're gonna weld this little piece in, and I guess after that we'll start getting this prettied up. This is more or less how it's going to look. It should be pretty close at this point. I've got to get some real bright light and go along. I'm going to inspect the weld seam now that it's all ground. I noticed there was like one spot here where there's still a little bit of the, you can kind of see it maybe, I don't know, where the seam didn't get welded up. And that's just because on a panel like this, with it being such a large surface area over something that has like a big flat kind of contour like this, there's not a lot of tight like radius bends and stuff. You can't get it very hot when you're welding, otherwise you're prone to really warp this panel and wind up with that nasty like oil can type, you know, where it's a boom, 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 boom. So you probably noticed in the video of me welding it that I was just doing really small sections about an inch at a time, and I was doing a technique that's called stitch welding, where essentially you keep the temperature really low on the welder, and you're literally essentially just doing a series of tack welds. So you tack it, let it cool, and you can watch it through the helmet and see it's like red hot, and then it, you know, cools, and then once, you know, the red coloration goes away, I'll put another stitch. I do a seam about 1/2 inch to 1 inch long, take the air blower, go back over it and just cool the panel down so that the surrounding metal and everything's not getting super hot from just continuously running these short beads. And it definitely, I mean, it's in and there's no big warps or anything. The seam has, you know, the ever so slight where it pinches in because the heat actually will shrink the metal a little bit along the seam. But that's pretty normal, and unfortunately, I'm not, you know, I'm a glorified body man. When it comes down to it, I'm more a painter than, you know, a metal tech or a body man. I can definitely get the job done, but I don't have the tooling to make this flawless like someone who would at a sheet metal shop with like one of those big fancy planishing hammers that they can go along and they can planish the whole weld seam now and get it all flattened out and perfectly smooth. I'm just, you know, I already ran the straight edge over it, and you can see along this weld seam here, if you look straight down from the top, there's maybe like a 32nd of an inch or a 16th of an inch where it's sunken down ever so slightly, just right here. That's not a lot of filler to be doing, you know, over a seam like that. So essentially what I'm gonna do now is get a little bit more of the metal exposed around the outside of this. And then I'm gonna start taking a look at things and probably get my dent pull system out and just kind of start finessing the panel and, you know, doing some spot shrinking and pulling and just making sure that everything is all nice and straight across this whole thing. And then we'll probably buzz it real nice in some 80 grit. Obviously before any of this, I gotta finish doing my couple little welds, inspect the seam. And then, yeah, I'll put a skim of body filler across this and get it all block sanded out, and then I'll go over to the other side.
And do the whole thing again.
Yeah, and then do the whole thing again. I like to do one whole side and get it finished before I move to the other side. It helps me to nail down the process that I'm gonna be doing, so I'm not like guessing simultaneously on both sides. You know, if there's one thing that I learned from this side, I can take it to the other side and it goes twice as fast. I got all the undercoat or the chip guard stuff ground off the bottom here so that way we can replicate it, you know, later on. This is all buzzed down in some 80 just to kind of condition the metal real nice, get it ready for filler. Blew it off the air blower, give it a quick wipe with some wax and grease remover, and let it dry off for a minute or two. And then I'm gonna mix up some kitty hair. I'm probably gonna kitty hair the weld seam, and then we'll do a skim of body filler over the whole thing to start evening it out, and then probably finish it off with some pinhole glaze. So that blocked out nice. Got it all chopped down in 80 grit. Got the shape in there, pretty good. Got to buzz down this bottom section here and the spot weld seam on the side. But aside from that, it's looking pretty good. I gotta, you know, go around and do the edge work and feather it out in 150. I'll blow it off real quick and see if it needs a skim of glaze putty for pinholes and stuff. And if it does, then I might go ahead and tap these down and then do a skim of glaze over it. Got this thing all ready for primer. Got it all edged out and everything. The repairs came out pretty smooth. Each side went pretty identical, pretty much the same process. Whoa.
What?
Whoa.
I watched you put those in. They don't look anything alike.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't look at both sides of the truck at the same time, right?
Ain't going to the car show.
Ain't going to the truck show. I really hope he puts that in the video. Anyway, so it was the same process on this side. Did some kitty hair on the weld seam. Gave us that little bit of fill that I needed. And then added a little bit of rigidity to that seam so that it doesn't flex. And, you know, keeps it nice and sturdy. Quick skim with the lightweight body filler to just even everything out. And then a quick skim with the glazing putty to get all the pinholes and any last little imperfections out. Everything's feathered to 220 grit, so it's all super smooth. This section through here, up along where it meets the paint, is feathered out in 500. I'm gonna do a soft edge tape line along here. And then when I'm shooting, I'm gonna keep my primer down low. I'm trying to keep it away from this paint up here. But I always like to scuff up a little bit higher than I know I'm gonna go, just in case there's any, you know, overspray or just a little bit of extra, the fan winds up in this spot. That way I'm not painting over top of, you know, unsanded material. This side, under here, this little tab and everything was in pretty good shape. I wire wheeled it down and there wasn't any rust on it. So that one's good. On the other side, it was looking a little bit rotten. So I went ahead and coated it all down with Pore 15 and did that yesterday. I'm gonna let it cure up a little bit longer today because it's still a tiny bit soft. And then I'm gonna scuff it down and this will all be ready for primer. I'm gonna do a wet on wet coat of epoxy. So I'll do a single coat of epoxy just to give us really good adhesion on any of the bare metal and stuff that's poking through. And then let it cure for about hour and a half. And then 2-3 coats of primer surfacer. And she'll be looking right as rain. We got this bed in here all masked up. I'm going to mix up a little bit of this DTM epoxy primer. It mixes 1:1 to 25% as a sealer. So I'm gonna do 1 coat to just kind of, get us really good adhesion and stuff onto some of these bare metal spots, things that I got poking through. We're gonna let that cure up for about an hour and then maybe a little bit longer. We'll see, because the temperature is a little bit cooler today. And then mix up some of this at 4:1 as a primer surfacer and probably do 2 or 3 coats of that wet on top of the epoxy. So no sanding. That about wraps up the repair on these little bed corners. In the next video, I'm going to be going over the paint process, which will entail some of the prep work and getting the color match and everything dialed in, doing the blend and stuff like that. So be on the lookout for the next video. You can see this thing all prettied up and done.